Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another homegrown lecture series. We are starting out our third quarter, if you can believe it already, in 2022. And today we have Paul Winski, County Extension Agent in horticulture here in Harris County. He's going to be talking about identifying pest and disease issues in the garden. But if you look ahead to the other two talks for this quarter, Shannon Dietz, County Extension Ag Agent, will be talking about safety in the home garden. And then I myself, Brandy Keller, will talk all about mint in September. Just a reminder, we do have a podcast, which is it's going really well. We have just finished our 14th podcast, and Paul interviewed Lauren Kirchner, Marketing and Sales Director for Spring Creek Growers. So check out our podcast. It allows us to highlight some of the people that we work with, that partner with in the county, and just kind of highlights different businesses, partners, volunteers, that we do work with. I do want to also put in a plug for something that is not on the screen. There will be a Cultivating School Gardens conference on July 20th. It's a pretty comprehensive full-day conference. It is online, so you don't have to worry about struggling with traffic. And it is only $30. For teachers, there are 7 continuing education credits available. It will basically have 2 tracks. One track will talk about all the things about plants, how to lay out the garden, some design issues, what to plant, how to plant, irrigation, beneficials, and then what to do with that garden over the summer. The second track will be all about support and funding. So, whether it's a community garden or a school garden, there's always issues with, getting enough volunteers. So how to really build a good solid team, funding, some curriculum options with junior master gardeners. And then we will also take a look at 3 school gardens around the state, successful school gardens. So you can see, just how some other schools are doing that. If you are interested in that, I will post a link once Paul gets started. And thank you very much. Thank you for attending today. You're spending a nice hot day indoors. So Paul, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction, Brandy. Let's get started here. So today I am going to talk about identifying pest and disease issues in the garden. And, this growing season has been unique, one of the hottest Junes that we've had. So I'm sure your lawn, your vegetable garden, your flowers, if are probably showing some signs of stress. And so what this is actually I think all of these are questions that I've received so far this season, this year. And so, the images are what people send to us. And, we always stress how important it is to take a good picture in focus in order to help us help you identify what the issue is. So let's get started right here. So here's our first one. So we've got a rose and we've got these lime green little insects hanging off them. You can see this bud down here in the corner is just covered with them. So, what's the issue going on here? And so if you are a gardener and if you've been out, you will know that these are aphids. And aphids are a royal pain in the neck in the heat of the summer. They're very easy to identify. They have antennae. They have what they call these 2 tailpipes that come off their posterior end called cornicles. And they have a piercing, sucking mouth part. So that's why you're normally going to see them on the growing tips or soft tissue, because that growing that mouth part pierces in. and then it is able to suck the fluids out of the tissue, which can then cause to distortions and problems with that. One unique thing about aphids is they are all females. So you're probably wondering or scratching your head saying, all right, so if they're all females, how do they proliferate so quickly? The female, she just basically gives birth or burps out a young female adult when she is going on, and she's dropping off about 8 of these every day, 8 to 10, depending on temperature. Again, with all insect populations, they will increase in correlation to temperature increases. So as we get hotter, we get warmer, they will start to reproduce quicker. So what might be a few aphids one day, you can come back in 2-3 days under the right conditions, and the next thing you know, you've got an issue like this where the entire bud and stem is covered. The good thing is there are a lot of natural predators that will feed on these guys, which is great. So if you've got diversity in the landscape and you're inviting those beneficials in, there are parasitic wasps that will come in and predate them. They will lay their egg inside them, and then that egg will grow and feed on the aphid and kill it off that way. Lady beetles, both the adult and the larvae stage, will feed, so that's great. They'll feed on these aphids. They love that soft body. They can just come through. And then the green lacewing, the larvae, will also feed on them. So we've got a lot of natural predators that will feed on them. On the chemical side, you can probably get by with insecticidal soaps or horticultural oils. You're going to have to cover the plant, or you're going to have to cover the insect with it in order for it to really work. The only issue is if there are some beneficials in there, even though these are softer, these soaps and oils are softer, if they hit some of the predators, they can knock out the predators also. So just be aware, aphids, they feed, they'll give off honeydew. You might see sooty mold on them. So if you're starting to see sooty mold, you've probably got a pretty good aphid population if you're starting to see that. So aphids are one of the problems we're dealing with. Now, here's another one. This one initially, when I saw this, I had not seen it before. So this is Ruellia. This is the Mexican petunia, and you're probably thinking, we got white fuzzy type growth on this. It's probably a fungus or something, is what we're seeing. And you might be thinking powdery mildew, but you would be wrong. And that's what I was thinking initially. I was either thinking powdery mildew or some herbicide or spray damage. It's actually called Arrhenium, and it is caused by a mite, an Aphid mite. So these mites are even smaller than the two-spotted mite that we normally find in our plants. And they feed on the underside of the tissue, and then you see this white sort of woolly type patches that will occur on the leaf tissue. It can also occur on the stem. Treatment, you can spray with an insecticide that would work for mites. A lot of times the plant will just grow out of it. The other thing is you can come through and prune it out, bag the damaged material, get rid of it, and Mexican petunia grows like a weed. It will grow back quickly, and in most cases, it's not a major issue. We have not heard or seen any instances where it just completely wipes out the plant. It just gives this white, fuzzy, downy look, but it's not a fungus. It's actually mite damage. Here's one. So this is a cucumber, and we're seeing this white powdery growth on it. So this is one, if you've grown any of these types of plants or anything that is susceptible, this one is powdery mildew. So we're going to see powdery mildew on the top of the leaf surface. It is a fungal disease. Initially, when it starts out as a little yellow spot, and you probably think nothing of it, but then over time it will start to sporulate and you'll get that downy look to it. The best control for this is air movement, so proper spacing, so not overcrowding. And this can be a challenge with especially your vining crops, because they like to spread out, and if you've got limited, growing area, that this could be a challenge. Proper watering is also key. So making sure that foliage is nice and dry going into dusk, going into the evening time, because you don't want that ideal conditions where it's wet, not and it's going into darkness. It's ideal then for those spores to attach and grow. The other thing is there's a lot of breeding that's been done, and there are varieties that are resistant. So remember, resistant doesn't mean that it's immune to powdery mildew. It may still get it, but it may not get it to a degree of some of the other varieties that it hasn't been bred. So again, it may be more well, it may still get it, or you may not see it to the degree that you would see on some of the other varieties. Fungicides that you can use, active ingredients that has potassium bicarbonate, hydrogen dioxide, or a copper-based fungicide. Again, with whether it's a fungicide, an herbicide, a pesticide, the key is first make sure you're identifying what it is that you have. Don't go and put something out. I've got it on the shelf in my garage, I'm just going to apply it. Make sure you identify what it is, so you know what you're dealing with, and you can put out the proper chemical if you want to go that route. It's always a challenge where we get an email and they send it, and I said, well, this is what I've applied already, and it's a fungus and they're putting out an insecticide. Well, A, you're wasting product, and B, you're not even hitting the target because you haven't identified what the issue is. All right, here's one that this is on a pepper. And who's watching the Tour de France now? This looks like some of those switchbacks that those riders are going through and racing their bikes around. So you can see there's no rhyme or reason to it. This is where it started, and it's just traveling in and out, back and forth. We see this on citrus. So this is leaf miner damage, and this is minor, minor as in M-I-N-O-R, not M-I-N-E-R. What happens here is the female, she lays her egg just underneath the leaf surface. So you've got the epidermis, you have some cells in between, the mesophyll, and then there's another, the lower surface of the tissue. And so she's able to take her ovipositor, dispense an egg. That egg will hatch, and then it's the larvae that has to feed on those nice soft spongy cells, and as it's feeding, it just travels through and makes this sort of unpleasant looking tunnel throughout the plant. So that's some of the issues with it. Over time, and depending on the population and the infestation, it can affect the leaf function because it's affecting the amount of chlorophyll in that tissue, and then you're going to have issues with growth. So overall, in most cases, it's not a major problem. Some cases you will see stunted growth. I used to have a Satsuma. I'd get leaf miners on it. I never sprayed for it. And it never negatively affected the plant. So again, every crop is different, and a lot of crops are susceptible to it. The good thing is there are natural predators that are out. They're very tiny parasitic wasp. One is Diglyphus, the other one is Dacnusia. And what these do is they actually do similar to what the leaf miner female does, is they'll find where that larvae is traveling in that tunnel, and then she will go ahead and lay her egg inside that larvae. And so basically it will stop that larvae from feeding anymore, because her egg is now inside that larvae feeding on the larvae, and then another Dacnusia or Diglyphus will emerge from it. So we do have these natural predators in the area. Most cases they're going to go after the softer or the newer growth of the leaves because it's easier for that the female leaf miner to lay her egg. So we've got natural predators. Spinosad works great. Active ingredients of either permethrin or bifenthrin or carbaryl can also be used in order to get these guys under control. Here's one, if you're a pathologist, this makes your eyes water. You love this. You're getting excited. So you got these pustules. This is hollyhock, and I have never seen a hollyhock grown in this area that doesn't have this occur during the season. But these nice yellowish orange pustules, and you can see it looks like a bad case of acne here on the underside of this foliage. And this is rust. And rust in most cases is going to be an orange type of coloration to the spores. The pathogen is Puccinia. In severe infestations, these growths will grow so much that they'll actually put holes in the tissue, and that plant is going to decline. Normally occurs in wet conditions. So, you're probably saying, well, we've really been pretty dry. But if you've got an area where you've got an automated irrigation system and you're watering on a regular basis, and that plant's not drying out, it's going to bed with wet foliage, it's ideal conditions for these spores to attach and thrive. Control is if you've got any of these, because daylilies get rust. There's multiple others. Certain turf gets rust. It's best to clean it up, get it out of there. Do not compost it, bag it, and throw it away because it's going to be a problem for future crops there if you've got it. Fungicides, the active ingredients of myclobutanol, neem oil, or chlorothalonil will help. But again, the main thing with any of these pests, and pests is general, whether it's a fungus, insect, you've got to scout your crops. You've got to scout your garden. You have to be out there looking at the underside of the foliage, looking at the growing points, looking at the older foliage, just so you have an idea of what's going on. And if something doesn't look right, it may not be anything major, but at least keep an eye on it so you've got a reference point, and you don't allow these to get out of control too quickly. Here's one that's really cool looking, and this was out. I was out visiting some of our master gardeners at one of the community gardens, and this is a pepper plant, and you've got this bullseye effect, this central area, and then we've got these lines coming off of it, and it's sort of got a mosaic look to it. They're very cool looking, but it's a major problem. So this is spotted wilt virus. And you can tell this plant was on the decline because it looked like it needed water, but that wasn't the case. There was plenty of water in that soil. It's actually called tomato spotted wilt virus. And you're probably saying, well, why is it tomato spotted wilt virus? They're all in that same family. It's all in the same solanaceous crop. So it turns around and goes into, it could go into eggplant, tomatoes, peppers, tomatillas, anything like that. And it is spread by thrips. So thrips are very small. They have a rasping type mouth part. So it obviously must have fed off of a plant that had the virus. And then when it came to this one, it likes to get into the pollen. It likes to get into the flower, or it will scratch the leaf surface. So this is the problem. What is going on here? This spotted virus. The severity depends on the cultivar, because some of these cultivars are, again, resistant to it. So they may get a little bit of it, but you're not going to see the plant decline. It's going to be able to power through and continue on with its growth and its production. You see this distortion. It can also affect the fruit. So if the plant is strong enough that it sets fruit, you may see some of the splotching and some of these issues with the fruit. The unfortunate thing is with viruses, it doesn't matter what plant, what virus it is, there are no viricides out there that we can treat with it. So the best thing is dig the entire plant out, put it in a plastic bag, and get rid of it. You want to keep it from infecting, from being a source for other thrips to feed on and potentially cause some problems down the road for maybe any of the other solanaceous crops you might have growing in that bed. Now here's one. This is echinacea, so coneflower. And I got this email, and they were concerned about some of these yellow foliage and things like that. So the question I have is, to you, just as you can think about it now, is it an issue? And what I always do is look at the entire plant. So, okay, yeah, you've got some discoloration down here in this older foliage, but there's plenty of flowers. There's growing points that we've seen new growth. So to me, this is one where, yeah, I'll keep an eye on it, but in most cases, it might be a little bit hungry. Nitrogen, if you are a little deficient in nitrogen, it's going to show up in the older foliage. And it is mobile in the plant. So all the terminals, everything up top looks nice and green. You've got some leaf spot here. You may have had a little bit of fungus at one time, maybe when it was wet. But overall, I wouldn't worry about it. I would probably recommend just remove those leaves, bag them, throw them out in the trash. Don't compost, because if there are any spores or anything, we don't want any other additional issues. But overall, this is one where I see no major problems. Enjoy the flowers. The pollinators are going to enjoy those flowers. And some of those, the stems are long enough, you can even enjoy them as a cut flower. So to me, it's not an issue on this plant. Here, this is one we get on a regular basis. Tomato flower abortion. So what's causing that? And there's, depending on the time of year, certain things will cause that abortion to occur. It is stress related. So at this time of year, it is our high day temperatures along with our high night temperatures. That plant never gets a chance to sort of relax, kick its feet up in the air conditioning and just say, it's nighttime. It's still hot, and this plant is struggling. As you can see, the ideal range for growth for proper fruit set and everything is in that 70 to 85 degree Fahrenheit daytime temperature. Well, we've been well above that, the whole month of June. The other issue is this time of year is the humidity. Okay, ideal temperatures for the pollen is or percentages is in that 40 to 70% humidity. Well, we're well above that. And what the humidity does is it interferes or affects the pollen release and its ability to stick to that stigma. So the stigma is the female part of the flower, and the pollen lands on that, and then it grows down and fertilizes the egg and the ovule. And so when the humidity is too high, the pollen won't stick. Or it won't release. There's issues with it. So there's mechanical issues that are causing that problem. The other thing to be aware of is early season, we may see this also. And normally that occurs when our night temperatures dip too low, below 50. And it's affecting, again, pollen development and the overall flower development. So this is the time of year, if you're still getting tomatoes on your plant, great. But if not, this is the reason why it is not occurring. All right, so let's take a look at turf now. Here we've got the homeowner wanted to know, they want their turf is supposed to be St. Augustine. They wanted to know what's going on in here. What's this other plant that's coming in, and how can I get rid of it? So what we got here is Bermuda grass trying to take over. And we don't want, some folks don't have an issue with it. A little bit of Bermuda in there. Some other folks, they just want, it's all one crop or the other. And so the challenge here is there are no herbicides that we can spray to kill off the Bermuda and not negatively affect the St. Augustine. So that's the challenge. From my perspective, I would do nothing. And that's just my opinion. I have St. Augustine. I've got some Bermuda in it. And, I just live with it. I know it's there. What I do in order to minimize it is down here with these cultural practices. If you understand, St. Augustine likes to be mowed very high, 3.5 inches, maybe even up to 4 inches. As I cut mine as high as I can set my blade, and yes, I cut my own lawn. I don't have anybody else cut it. I cut my own lawn, and I set it as high as possible. And so what that does is that is an advantage for the St. Augustine because Bermuda grass likes to be cut at 1/2 inch to 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches tops, but more in that 1 inch range. So if we can get a nice thick St. Augustine lawn, a lot of times we can outcompete that Bermuda and it will eventually choke off, die off, or go away. In small cases, you can dig out the Bermuda, but again, you got to watch those runners, those rhizomes. They're just all over the place. The other thing I would say, just in looking at the health, the overall health of this lawn, is if you can see my arrow down here, is look at the leaf blades on the St. Augustine. They all seem to be ripped. They're not sliced or cut nicely. So actually that that mower, that blade probably needs to be sharpened. This type of tattering on the edges can cause some issues over time. Good spot for diseases to get in. So make sure your equipment is up to par and working well. All right, this one I got this email, and this is of course we've got to identify the plant. So this is a citrus, and we've got some speckling, some bumps down in through here. We've got some here on the other. This one looks further up on the stem. This one looks like it might be a little bit an older leaf. This is Citrus melanos, and so this is a fungus. At this stage, I don't think it's an issue. So what happens is we will start to see small reddish brown spots. Eventually, we'll see some yellow halos around it as it matures. And then if you were to rub your finger on the underside of this foliage in heavy infestations, it's going to have a sandpaper feel. It's going to feel rough. You're going to be able to feel on the underside the openings or the indentations that this fungus is causing. Normally, this starts to occur in the early season, especially if we're rainy. And so, our early season, we were quite wet. But now that we're in the heat of the summer and it's very dry and we're not getting a lot of rain, you could see that this disease is not progressing further because the conditions aren't ideal. So early season, if this is a problem, if you're seeing susceptibility to it, I would recommend a copper fungicide application. At this point, I would probably just say pull off some of those leaves that show, because that's a potential source of spores in the future when conditions change. Clean the plant up and just keep an eye on it. It's one that in this case doesn't look to be a major issue, but it's something you just want to be aware of. All right, I'm sure everybody has probably seen this before, but I wanted to put it in. Got this email with this week coming up, and of course this is crabgrass. So we've got two varieties or species. We have smooth crabgrass and also large crabgrass. And if you want to see the specifics on that, if you go to the Augustine Turf website, they've got they got a tab there with Texas turfgrass weeds, and they've got some great images where you can see not only the overall plant, but what the flower head looks like and the seed head looks like and things like that. It is a summer annual, so the good thing is it's only going to last for the summer, but it's a very low grower. That prostrate growth, it grows out into the crop or into the turf, and so sometimes it gets lost down in there and continues to grow. A lot of times folks don't see it until the seed heads start popping up. Control is, again, as in most lawns, we want a dense, healthy lawn where we want to be able to mow at the ideal height. If we have this lawn nice and thick, a lot of times the seed isn't going to be able to germinate because it's going to be shaded out. In certain cases, if it's a small plant here and there, go ahead and just dig it out. Go out there with a little hand trowel, get as much of that root system as possible, and get it up out of there. The real success programs that turf managers use is actually a pre-emergent herbicide. So you got to think back. Now we're seeing crabgrass getting that pre-emergent out in March, and you've got to watch when soil temperatures, because soil temperature is key for germination for crabgrass seed. But get that pre-emergent out. Here's some options: pendimethalin, prodiamine, or mesotrione, and that could really help reduce your populations, because the pre-emergent keeps that seed from germinating, and that's the key. It's a lot easier stopping it from germinating than it is trying to get it under control in this stage. And in this stage, we would then come with a post-emergent herbicide, and phenoxaprop or quinaclorac is two of your options. Again, any of these pesticides, whether for fungus, insects, or weeds, make sure you are reading the label and applying at the proper at the recommended levels, because the research has been done, and that's the key to being successful with it. You know, the chemicals are safe as long as you use them properly. When you start going off, off key with it, not following the directions, that's when you run into issues. All right, this one now we can see in here we've got some browning foliage. There is a stem here that has a bend in it, and that's a key here to what this is. All right, so first we got to identify the plant. The plant is, well, obviously it's a tree. This is a Bradford pear. And so pears, trees in the rosaceous family are prone to fire blight, and that's what we're seeing here. So it looks like someone's come through with like a blowtorch and just singed off the edges. If we were to look at this tree, not from the inside, but looking at it from the outside, we would see these pockets and tips. It occurs on the young leaves, young shoots, and the telltale sign is that it forms that hook, that shepherd's crook is what we used to say. And so you can see there is some damage there, and this is a bacteria. So Erwinia is the problem. Normally, this will start to occur in the spring. Again, when that new growth is coming out, it's probably more susceptible. We get rainy conditions, we get humidity, and then we have this issue. The best thing, depending on the size of the tree, is if you can just prune out the infestation. Go back probably 8 inches into that stem and prune it back out. You would be able to tell if there's on where that stem is clean or not after you cut that stem. If you were to slice it lengthwise with a knife, if it's clear in the pith of it, you're good. If you're seeing black lines or black streaking down in through there, that's that bacteria that is still working. So you've got to clean it up that way. Larger trees, you would need an arborist to come in, and they would be able to treat with a bactericide for that. But that is fire blight, which in fact I saw a tree or two in our neighborhood that's still showing some signs of it. This one is a weed. This one's a pain in the neck. It's got this, it's vine-like, and it's got that undulating type foliage. So it's very appropriately named wavy leaf basket grass. And here you can see it taking over in a lawn area. You can see some blades in the lower picture, you can see some blades of St. Augustine lawn. But overall, this isn't a real good situation. This is a tough one. It's very difficult to control. So it's a weed that you're going to find in the shade, and in most cases you're going to find it where it's wet. And as you can see in this upper picture here, the sprinkler head's sitting right there. So you know that area is going to be nice and moist on a regular basis. So it's got rhizomes. It likes to run, and then if you allow it to flower and set seed, the seeds have these little spurs on it that will catch on to your pants, animals, whatever. It can be spread around that way. So it's a real headache. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of options to get this guy under control. Digging it out is probably your best. I would say if you're checking your lawn and you start to see this, find that initial plant when it's young like this in these upper images, and either dig them out or spot spray them, because there's not a lot of options. Glyphosate is probably your best options for spot applications. The unfortunate thing is using any of the organic herbicides, it will just burn the foliage, but it's not going to kill the root system. And so that's one of the challenges there. So just keep an eye, because if you get them when they're small and young like this in the top picture, you've got a fighting chance. If you get it to this point, you're going to have to come in and just either deal with it, or you're going to have to come in and nuke it with something, like glyphosate to knock it back big time, and then start all over again. All right, this one, we're in the landscape. This is a holly. This is sky pencil holly. And you can see majority of these guys do not look happy. There's a couple of them that are still showing some green, but they are starting to decline. So again, the customer or the homeowner wants to know what in the world is going on. We put in this landscape, and in most cases, with just from the information they gave us, I would say this is Phytophthora root rot. And so this is a water mold that affects the root system. And in most cases, what happens early on, the plant looks like it's thirsty. And so what do we normally do when we see that? If we're not, spending time in the garden, we're going to give it more water. And what happens then? We're just making the problem worse. One good way, or one easy way to tell if this is the issue, is looking down at the base of the plant, right there at the soil line. And in most cases, what you're going to see is either a splitting of the bark, or you're going to start to see some lesions. And that splitting of the bark and those lesions are affecting the flow of water and nutrients up and down the plant, up into the plant. And so that's why, it starts to initially show that it looks like it's a drought problem. But in most cases, there's plenty of water there. It's just that root system can't take it up and can't get it up into the plant. So as we continue to water more and more, the root system starts to rot on us. It starts to it's reduced, and then we have some major problems. The other problem is, these plants may have had those spores or that problem there before. And it just wasn't. It didn't manifest itself because conditions weren't right. So you've always got to be aware of that. But again, Phytophthora, boxwoods, they get it. Things like that. Look at that interface of where the soil is and where the stem is, and see if there's any kind of either lesions or cracking of the bark or splitting. And in that case, it's probably going to be Phytophthora. All right, here's a pretty cool one, and this is one that is starting to come out now. This one is, if you've got issues with, or if you've got Bermuda grass lawn. So I'm going to give you a hint. This is Bermuda grass, and we've got what looks like to be a witch's broom almost. So what in the world is causing this? Could it be, herbicide drift? Could it be too much fertilizer? In this case, there is a mite, and it's called the Bermuda grass mite, and that's the damage it causes. So this mite likes to feed on the succulent plant tissue. So new growth, it gets in there down at the base of the new growth, starts to feed, and the plant reacts by putting out this proliferation of growth, and we start to get this rosetting or tufting. And there's certain varieties of Bermuda grass that are more prone to the mite damage than others. Some of the newer varieties, the newer breeding that's out there now, these varieties are much less susceptible to it, and you don't see it to the degree that we're seeing here. So one thing is, if you've got a Bermuda lawn and you start to see this, what I would recommend is one, when you mow, I know we normally want to mulch those clippings back in as a source of nitrogen, but in this case, we want to collect and bag it and get rid of it, because if we mulch it and put it back in, we're just keeping the population moving forward. And there's few chemical options out there. There's a product called abamectin that has some success against it, but there's not a lot of good options. The main thing is, if you're going to put a Bermuda grass lawn in, make sure, look into if it's a variety that's resistant to this mite damage, so you don't have to worry about it. Here's a fan favorite. You got these herd of little orange insects over your tomatoes or on your peppers or on your eggplant, and they are just, causing issues. If you're in the garden and you grow veggies, and I've even seen these on ornamentals, this is leaf-footed bugs. This is the immature stage. So if you see them in herds and packs like this, it's great to just pick them off into or knock them into a bucket of soapy water and get rid of them. They like to attack the ripening fruit, and it will cause some discolored depressions in it. And you'll notice, you'll be able to tell, especially on your tomatoes and any of these, what the issue is and the problems that they cause. I had a satsuma, and I had problems with leaf-footed bugs on my satsumas, and they caused issues. And for like 2 seasons, the crop was terrible because I had this issue. The one control that I used for my satsuma, because there was no way I was going to spray it, I used a trap crop. I planted sunflowers next to it on either side, and by golly, it worked. It's one of those things, is, prove it to me and I'll believe it. I'd go out there in the mornings and at evening, and those sunflowers were just covered with these things. And all I did was had a bucket of soapy water, knocked on the flower, everything dropped in there, and I was able to control them, and my satsumas were great that year. So if you've got problems with these, sunflowers are a great trap crop. Insecticide-wise, we've got permethrin, cyfluthrin, and esfenvalerate are some other options. But these guys, again, they cause problems. The adults even sort of go about traveling around in packs also. So leaf-footed bugs, big problem. Just try to get out in front of it so you don't get that damage to your fruit. Now here's one. This was interesting. So this plant, if you don't know, is Rangoon creeper. All right, so this is the one. This is a vining type plant. It gets clusters of tubular type flowers. They open white, and then as they mature, they become red, but they've got a great fragrance. One of my favorite plants. But this guy doesn't look happy. It almost looks like, well, could it be nutritional? That new growth is pretty yellow. And so you might think, well, maybe it's iron deficiency. But then we're seeing curling, and it's not, it's deformed. So the other option is, were any herbicides grown in the area, sprayed in the area, and maybe there's some drift. The mature leaves look fine, but it's that new growth. So asked a few more questions. It wasn't, nutrition wise, it wasn't an issue, and it wasn't, no herbicides were applied. So the issue here is broad mite. These mites, we've covered multiple different mites that can be a real pain in the neck growing down here, and this is broad mite damage. We saw these. I used to work for a paper company. We had our stock beds with sweet gum, and we would get broad mite damage where we would take our cuttings. They feed on the newest growth. And so what result is you get this small, stunted, strap-like curling foliage. Foliage can curl either in or out, inwards or downwards. And these mites are, again, extremely small. So you're going to need a hand lens or a scope in order to see it. They're about 0.2 of a millimeter. So you're not going to see them with the naked eye. But as you can see, you can tell that damage. So the control best, what I would do in this case is I would probably prune out those affected areas because there's enough a healthy growth there that looks fine. I would prune out that area, and then I would come in with a spray, and make sure with these that you're getting the spray on the underside of the foliage, because that's where these mites are living. Again, you're probably not going to have that much of a population in the older foliage because they like that succulent new growth. So that's why if we get rid of that succulent new growth, we're probably getting rid of most of that population. But some are going to fall off and things like that. So I would prune it out and then come in with a spray application and then watch that new growth. If you start to see this curling or strap-like growth again, you've probably got some mite damage, and then hit it early with one of these. And then remember, summer or dormant oil, we're not spraying dormant oil at this time of year because it's going to negatively affect the plant. We're going to see some burning. We can see some negative responses. So we want to use a summer oil, which is a little bit lighter. All right, we are coming into the home stretch here. Here's one. Identify the plant, and from this image you probably can't tell, but this is crepe myrtle, which we see a lot of in the landscape, and probably one of the pests that I know A&M has done a lot of research on is crepe myrtle bark scale. So this is what crepe myrtle bark scale looks like. It almost looks like a mealy bug. It's white. It gets a waxy outer coating. If you were to take your fingernail and puncture those scales, you'd see a pinkish red type fluid emerge from it. They have a sucking mouth part, so they poke into that phloem and pull out the juices and can negatively affect the growth of the plant. The other key is, again, since they've got that piercing sucking scale insects, they are going to produce a lot of honeydew, which will lead to the sooty mold. And so a lot of times along that trunk, you're going to see a lot of black sooty mold. And you can see down in through here along that stem where the discoloration is occurring. What they have found, since they've done a lot of research in this, is the host plant genus has expanded. So more and more plants are becoming susceptible to this. Calocarpa, America Beautyberry, is now on the list, and there's several other ones. The good thing is biological controls. If you've got lady beetles, both the adults and the larval stage will feed on these guys. But when you have a population like this, and if you've only got a few lady beetles in the area, you're going to need a little bit more help there. So you may have to come in with an application of one of these chemicals, whether it's imidacloprid as a drench, or pyroproxyfen, or dinotefuran. There's a great website. There's a website within A&M that's just for crepe myrtle bark scale, and there's been a lot of research done with it between A&M, University of Tennessee, and I think there's one other university. There was 3 universities working on it. But there's a lot of good research, and there's a lot of good information on getting this under control. Here's our last one. So we're back in the lawns again. We've got this sort of thin, linear foliage. We got these little flowers that are popping up, but don't let it fool you. It is not your friend. This is Virginia buttonweed, which is a major problem, especially through the heat of the summer. It is very aggressive and prolific. It is a heavy seed setter. The stem fragments will root. So, if you chop it up, you don't get it all, and there's a stem around, it's gonna root. So one is, with any weeds, you definitely, if you can keep them from flowering, that's a key. This way they don't set seed, and then you're just dealing with the plant. They like wet conditions. So believe it or not, I know I haven't received a lot of calls or requests for information on getting this under control. Although I have seen in some lawns that are on an irrigation system that they are watering on a regular basis. I see this coming up and starting to take hold. So again, if you can run your lawn dryer, it's going to be able. You're going to be able to help keep this guy under control. The key here to getting this one, again, the seeds emerge in early April. So a pre-emergent herbicide down early will keep these seeds from germinating, and you won't have this issue. If you're waiting until July or August, you've got problems then. Because this becomes so matted, so thick, that you're going to have a hard time. So if you get your pre-emergent down, that's great. Early spring, as the plants are starting to germinate, this combination, and this is available on ready-to-use items that you can buy at any of the garden centers, that has 2,4-D, dicamba, mecaprop, and carfentrazone. You can put that early on if you start to see the seedlings, if you identify the seedlings that are germinating. And at this time of year, really the only option in trying to get it is applying a product called Celsius. And that's labeled for this weed when temperatures are above 85 degrees. So it will knock it back. It's going to take a little bit of time, but that's about your only option. So if you can run your lawn dryer, you're going to do much better. If you've had it in the past, think about getting out a pre-emergent in March. So when those seeds start to emerge or try to germinate in April, they're not going to be able to, because you've got that pre-emergent down. And so that is it. I have come to my conclusion here. I hope this helped you and made you more aware of what's going on in your garden or what you're seeing in the landscape. I guess, Brandy or Shannon, are there any questions, or have you guys been able to handle it all?
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I think everything's been handled. I
Great.
will just mention one, just, to be conversational, that someone had said that they tried to plant sunflowers. It kept them off the tomatoes last year. Then in the winter, they took over my loofah and even hibernated in a few that she missed before the freeze. Now she finds them in the loofah, cucumbers, lemon, cucumbers, just everywhere, blackberries. Right. But something she said, I kind of keyed on. She said, I planted tomatoes very late. Oh, wait, where is it? Anyway, somewhere it says that she planted the sunflowers close to all of those. So number one, I suggested that they're best controlled in the nymph stage. When they're all together, they're more susceptible to chemicals. And of course, once they're adults. So really it's about monitoring early in the season. But then also I thought, and I'll get your opinion on the sunflowers being planted so close to the garden. The point is to pull them away, right? So would she want the sunflowers further away from her garden to not attract?
No, not necessarily. So, right. There's you can do where you have your trap crops where like you planted a row away from it, so they're going there as opposed to into the plants where you're trying to protect them. And usually when they do that, it's to have that pest population there. And then what growers will do or farmers will do is they'll just spray that crop to kill them off. Mine, I had them around on either side of my satsuma tree. And so because if that's initially what they're going for, they love the pollen and they in those sunflowers much more than they say, going after that fruit. So the other challenge is with sunflowers is sometimes you have to have succession plantings because they come up, they bloom, and then that's it. And then so if you've got a long growing season, you're going to have multiple plantings of sunflowers in order to have that pollen source, in order to draw the leaf-footed bugs there, so you can trap them and get rid of them.
All right. And then we just had one more question come in. It said, do you have time to talk about root knot nematodes?
So root knot nematodes, in most, I'm trying to think what the best way to do this. They are a problem in certain beds. If you're not rotating your beds on a regular basis, you can have some problems with that. Control-wise, planting marigolds in those beds, you might want to turn around and take a season and grow marigolds in there, or grow Elbon rye in the cool season, and this will help lower that population. There are beneficial nematodes that you can apply to that bed that will go after the bad nematodes also. And so if they want more information, they can email, either of us on this group, and we can get them get them links where they can see what options there are. But yeah, in some cases, they just negatively affect the production. And it's difficult, but there are trap crop, and these plants, the marigolds and things like that, they almost act like a trap crop where it gets into the root system, but then they can't get out, or gives off a secondary product that affects the population and kills it off. So there are some options out there.
All right. Are you up for one more?
Sure, why not?
All right. Says they have boxwoods developing brown patches, and then it eventually spreads to the entire shrub. Webs have also appeared. That was kind of a statement, but I think it's a question. Okay,
so if you're seeing webbing, there's a good chance you might have some spider mite damage. So again, look on the underside of that foliage. You might need a little hand lens or a magnifier. If you've got webbing, you'll see, and you have spider mites, you'll see them walking on that webbing, because that's sort of their highways of getting around to different branches and things like that. So I'm thinking you may have some spider mite damage, and with as dry as we have been, it's ideal for spider mites. Spider mites like it hot and dry. They don't like it hot and wet. And so with the lack of rain we had, it's ideal conditions for spider mite populations to explode.
All right, one more.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about milk to treat powdery mildew?
I have heard that. It's one of those, I have never used it, and the reason why I say that is because in extension, milk isn't labeled as on its label. It's for human consumption. It's not for controlling powdery mildew. So I can't come here and say yes, you can use it. I have never used it. I have heard some people will apply it and they get control with it. So again, it's one of those that if you've done it, or you've, and if you've seen it on YouTube or something, I always take it with a grain of salt, because one of the challenges I've always seen with a lot of these things is it repeatable? And do you get that response? Do you get the control time in and time out? And some folks probably do. But unless it's been, tested against certain a control and under, I guess rigorously evaluated, I'll say it that way. I can't, and I would not make a recommendation of using it to control powdery mildew.
All right, that's about it.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, well, join us next month. If you haven't signed up, you can always do that. You can sign up for any of the topics through the end of the year. Thanks for joining us. And again, thank you, Paul, for this was a really, really great topic. So you will be emailed a survey, so please go ahead and fill that out. It's very short. We appreciate it. And until next month, stay cool.
Thank you.